The vast stretches of the unknown still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
Do you believe that you were made for more?
Man begins the greatest adventure in his history.
Knowing that there is a new height, a new horizon, a new possibility, a new world to discover.
Yeah, we're in this series called Relaunch Your Life. It's this idea of getting rid of all the things that might be bogging us down as we move into a new season to really focus on what matters most. And so in week 1, we talked about healing. We all have places in our life that need healing. And then we talked about belonging, how each of us has an intrinsic need to belong. And today we're talking about serving. And some of you have asked, just checking in. Last week I shared about this neck injury I've had, and I feel much, much better. Thanks for those of you who asked and were praying. I've never been more excited to get a shot in my spinal cord than I was this last week, but feeling much, much better. But today I want us to look at this idea of God's purpose in our life and finding even what his intention in creating us is. Forbes magazine just wrote about the Great Resignation. Have you heard about this? Apparently, COVID has caused 2/3 of people to want to quit their jobs to find something more meaningful. And when you go through something like we've gone through these last 18 months, you start to reevaluate. But before you quit your job, well, let me just encourage you to consider maybe things from a new perspective today. To consider God's purpose and how it can actually be lived out no matter who's paying you and no matter what job you might have. But I want to think for a moment about the people around us that God has brought. Years ago, I was in a grocery store and I heard this commotion in another aisle, and it sounded like it was a fight, and it was a woman yelling profanities. And I come around the corner, and she was yelling at her little girl. And it was kind of one of those disturbing moments that I don't know if it was because I was around the corner or other people saw her, that things kind of settled down. And in that moment, you were just kind of glad it was over. But then I started second guessing, should I have followed her? Like, should I have gotten her license plate? You know, and then you start to wonder, like, you know, what's going to help that little girl? Does this little girl have any hope? I mean, if I were to call the police, they could intervene, and perhaps that would have been exactly what may have happened in this girl's life. And that can help to a degree, but it certainly won't break the cycle. Will the government intervene, bringing this girl hope? Will education bring the healing and the kindness and the patience and the self-control to this mother's heart? And we all know that those are important things, but ultimately these are spiritual problems. See, that woman, that little girl, what they need is to discover that they are loved by God. They need a family to just befriend them and to bring them into a community like ours. A neighbor that could just be there to listen, to encourage, and to become a part of a community where they can find faith and find healing for some of those wounds that seem to be perpetuating hurt from one generation to the next. To find healing in the context of recovery, to find community to help them through the stresses of life. What's so amazing about this community is so many of us have been through a journey of healing, finding a place to belong, and in the context of serving others with others, we found a church family. And we've seen the cycles of brokenness pass from one generation to the next, find healing here. And that's some of your stories here in the room, or some of you watching online. You've actually experienced transformation with what God has done in your life in the context of this community. I want to ask a few quick questions, and I want you just to let your mind go right where it goes, filling in the blank. So don't say this out loud. There's no wrong answer. I just want whatever comes to mind when I ask the question. Just fill in the blank. If I had all the time in the world, I would. All right, good. You follow the direction. Don't say it out loud. It could be you would watch all the football games that are on today. Or maybe for some of you, it's to party like it's 1999. I don't know. I don't know what came to your mind in that moment. Let me try another one. Next question, just fill in the blank. I will be successful if I. What comes to mind first? Next one, last one. When I think greatness, I think of. Now, whatever comes to your mind, it could be that someone comes to your mind of who you aspire to become like, or maybe things that you want to accomplish in your life. But I wonder, and you don't have to raise your hand, but I wonder how many of you, the first thought that came to your mind is serving others. I would be successful if I was known for having a servant's heart. Or I would know I've discovered greatness if I served others. That's not what normally comes to our mind. And when we're thinking about relaunching our lives in a new season, we don't think of serving others. That's not what the world kind of teaches us. But if we want a truly fulfilling and purposeful life, that's exactly what Jesus teaches us to do. On the night before the crucifixion, Jesus was in a second-story apartment in a room eating Passover, his last meal with his followers. And Scripture records something really remarkable happening. It's in John 13. We're going to look at several verses here. It starts with this. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Think about that for a moment. Jesus had all the power of God within him, and he knew where he was headed. He knew where he was coming from. With that sort of power and authority, what would he do? Would he demand that everybody start to finally listen to him and do as he commanded? Would he expect them to do what he wants? Instead, he does something so remarkable. In the context of having this power and authority, he grabs a towel, puts it around his arm. He takes the posture of a servant. See, the lowest servant was the one who would wash people's feet. And they all wore sandals, and they'd been traveling, and so their feet were dirty. And Jesus took what the lowest servant did on himself. Think about that for a moment. The creator of the universe, the one who created the galaxies and the billions of stars, when he came to walk among us, he took the form of a servant, allowing himself to be born of a virgin, to grow up, to teach with authority and to heal, and ultimately to serve us to the point of giving his life. See, as you and I look at a new season and relaunching our life, it's important that we ask, why am I even here? How do you see yourself? Am I here to be served, or am I here to serve? When we ask ourselves that, it's an important question. Do we see ourselves as someone who needs to scratch and claw and labor to prove that I'm worth being served? Or do you see yourself as so loved by God, so worthy of God's calling you to be his child, that you see yourself as here to serve like he did? Maybe you have power and prestige and authority to order people around. And maybe you have a staff and they do what you say. Or maybe you have a staff and they don't, right? Or maybe you own your own business and you are your own employee and you still can't get that one employee to do what you need done, right? Or maybe you have no authority whatsoever. Regardless, the important question is, as a person, are you here to be served, or are you here to serve? See, if we claim to follow Jesus, and he had all the power, prestige, and authority, and yet became a servant, then our journey is to become just like him. If he said, follow me and I'll give you abundant, overflowing life and joy, but it will require giving your life, wouldn't you do it? There are lots of reasons why we don't serve, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But I want us to continue to look at this story and maybe even change our perspective a little bit, because I think a lot of us are just like in the story, Simon Peter. Notice what happens. Verse 6, Jesus came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. We tell God no a lot sometimes, don't we? But Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus didn't offer that. He says, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. Think about this for a moment. Jesus is a respected rabbi. These disciples had followed him around, some for 2.5 years, leaving everything behind. They were his followers. And now he, the rabbi, the great teacher, was now serving them, washing their feet. And he was washing the feet of those that were with him, even those who were among him who he knew would betray him. Jesus said, you don't serve in order to get cleaned up before God. He cleanses you when you trust in him. We don't earn his love or forgiveness by doing, by serving. We simply receive his love, and out of gratitude, that's why we serve. If we follow him to become who God has created us to be, then that means we will learn to serve others. It's how we express our love to God. It's how we live out our purpose on earth, using our unique gifts and resources and opportunities that he's given us. So why don't we see ourselves as here to serve others? One is important people don't serve. That's what Peter thought in that moment. Jesus, you're too important. You shouldn't be doing this. And for some of us, we think we might be too important. Like we paid our dues, so we would not have to serve any longer. See, if we remember, this is the night before Jesus would lay down his life to serve humanity. And on their way to Jerusalem, they know something is coming, but they're expecting that Jesus would overthrow the Roman government and become a king and rule. And they wanted to be right there with him in charge. In fact, they were debating, James and John, these two brothers, who would get to be at his right and left hand and rule with him. And so they come up to Jesus. And they say, hey, we've been talking. We want your 2 best cabinet positions. And Jesus says, you don't know what you're talking about. Do you even know what it takes to be greatest in the kingdom of God? Can you follow in my footsteps? And they say, yeah, of course, for sure. But he was actually saying, I'm about to lay down everything for the sake of others. Is that the path you're willing to take? Now, what happens is when the other 10 start hearing that they're arguing and jockeying for position, then they get upset and there's this big argument. And that's when Jesus steps in to change their perspective. Listen to what he says. This is what it means to be great in his kingdom. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man, that's a reference to himself, did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And so even after that moment, they still don't get it. They finally get to this room where they're to share this special meal together, the Passover meal. But no one had arranged for a foot washer to be there. See, this was cheap labor. The lowest paid position on the planet was someone who just washed the feet of those who traveled. You couldn't really have a Passover meal while your feet were filthy. And yet no one took the position, but the one they were there to honor, who then washed the feet of the disciples. See, Jesus says, in my kingdom, the most important. The greatest are those who do serve. You see, you're never greater. You're never more important. You're never more like God than when you serve others. You're never more like the one who created you than when you take a towel to serve. It's hard to believe that, isn't it? I know in my own life, it feels like that's something I keep having to relearn. Have you ever heard that story of, that analogy that if you're trying to find kind of God's way, if he closes one door, he opens another? You know those doors that we have in the kids area where like it opens, like there's two parts to it, right? And you can open the top and see the kids in there, but they can't really run out, you know? In my life, it feels like when God closes one door, he opens the bottom of another. It feels like the opportunities sometimes that are in front of me seem lesser than what I should take. But every time I've been willing to trust him, to humble myself, to actually enter into that door, I'm amazed at what opportunities God opens. Have you discovered that you are so important that he's inviting you to be part of the solution of bringing help and healing by serving others? We have so many remarkable people who serve so faithfully. A couple of stories. Wayne was the head of IT for the University of Texas, like the whole thing. And every Sunday at our North Austin campus, he serves kids. Every week. He goes in there with all these little ones. I think he worked with first graders for years. And one of these little kids one time said, "Mr. Wayne, could you be my daddy?" I want you to think, a man overseeing the entire UT system of IT felt the best use of his time on Sunday was to go to one service and help little kids who may not even have a dad, and then sit in the next service. It's amazing to me how someone in such a powerful position would be willing to serve. Or I think of Gloria McPherson. Maybe you know the story of the Hope Clinic. She's a doctor. She helped start our church, but she used her education and her passion to actually start a clinic for people that don't have healthcare options. And in our city, more and more, it became people who were refugees. So many doctors and nurses, and some of you volunteering to help refugees, not just through the Hope Clinic, but through our refugee network, making a difference. Or I think of just before the end of 2019, a life group, the Quadris, the McGinty's, the Schwartzes, the Spaldings came to me. They wanted to start a food pantry. They wanted to create a space where their children could serve our city. Now, this is in the fall of 2019. These are entrepreneurs and creatives and executives and medical professionals, and they want to spend their Saturday mornings doing a food pantry. Little did we know how much we would need their help. In 2020, there was the pandemic. Remember that? I think we're still in it, right? And we started serving 40 families a week. And then, just as you thought, well, maybe 2021 would be better, it wasn't. We had an ice apocalypse in which we were serving almost 40 people a day for a course of a week because a life group decided the most important thing for them to do is to serve our city. And some of you served alongside of them in that. And there's so many of you. I think of Karen Davis, who is a computer engineer who started a network serving some of those who are most hurting, who are homeless, those who are incarcerated. I think of some of you who have just incredible careers, and yet on Sundays, you are willing to just smile, to be a greeter, to make cold brew coffee, which starts next week, by the way. Good news, right? It's just amazing to me how so many of you give your life just to create a better space for others, serving others. And in fact, if you're wanting to jump in and be a part of what we're doing here, before you leave, just pick up one of these little half sheets of paper. They're right there. There's a little table. Just grab one of them, and you can scan it to get involved with serving. I want to share with you a video, some friends of mine out of Round Rock, and listen to how they have served their neighbors in the midst of this. Watch this.
Hi, I'm Kristen, and I've been going to Gateway for 14 years.
Hi, I'm Diana. I live right next door to Kristen. I have been living here in Texas for 2 years now.
I saw you guys and your moving truck move in.
Yeah, we were just wrapping up unboxing our entire house. Kristen and her beautiful, friendly kids and family came over and knocked on our door and invited us the first night to come have dinner at their house.
And you didn't accept.
We were like zombies and sweating, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not the best time for her to be coming here.
I was really excited. I had been praying for good neighbors who would just be on mission with us to get to know the neighbors. Like when you guys came, like God had really delivered for me on that prayer. One of the things my family loves to do is Friday nights spend time in our cul-de-sac riding bikes and eating pizza with our neighbors. And we would get frozen pizza and just set it out on a table or order some Domino's, have some homebrew beer, and just invite everybody over. And Diana was really an amazing partner in that. We really had to think about, like, how can we do this in a small way? Like, do we even do this? And if we do it, you know, who do we invite? There's really some challenging times to figure out what people were comfortable with. But in the end, we were able to say, you know, our mission is really loving our neighbors and bringing people along on great adventures. We just need to be consistent, and we need to just show up, and we'll just trust whoever comes or whatever happens. That's what God wants for us in that moment. And so what is it that we can just willingly give without expecting anything in return? And so Friday nights, like, we're committed to just being here on the patio. We end up having quality time together. We would have like some honest conversations on the patio. We spent a lot of time in the heat and the cold, all outdoors, so that we felt really safe and we felt like our kids could spend some time together. And that's when we started to do every Sunday some breakfast tacos. And we would just set up the church service, and we would invite all of our neighbors who may or may not go to church, who may or may not be Christian, to come over, bring a lawn chair, just sit out with us, have a breakfast taco. Diana would bring over some really good, yummy coffee, and then we would have some pico de gallo salsa, goes with our yummy tacos.
Yeah.
Then everybody else felt like they had to compete, and so we had all the neighbors bringing out Indian food that was like homemade, delicious Indian food, and it ended up bringing just neighbors who never came out of their house. We had a neighbor who came up to Diana, said she'll never come out of her house. She was very anxious.
But then she turned out to be one of the people and our neighbors that came every week. She started, you know, making her Indian food, and everybody loved it. And she just would run across the street to be here with us. I think people started letting their guards down, and people just gravitated towards that openness that, you know, we were all here in this together.
One of the things that we've loved doing, for example, is we'll have a playlist, and we'll just say, you know, what's your favorite year? When did you graduate? Or, you know, what is your favorite year of music, and play the top 10 from that. And have people tell us like where they were when they heard those songs. And Diana loves to like dig in and say, what does that mean to you?
Right.
We learn a lot about people and about things that they wrestle with, and, you know, hard times. And if I look back before Bikes and Pizza, like a lot of my friends look just like me, came from vanilla white bread families. And now I look around and we are friends with people from around the world because we're just getting to know our neighbors. When I walk in and there are people who grew up a block from one another and didn't know about it in California. We have a family who went to the same church in Kenya. You know, our Bikes and Pizza network has been such a blessing to us. God is doing some incredible things just because we're willing to show up on a Friday.
What I love about what they're doing is it's just in the midst of living life. In fact, I first met Kristen and Brett when I moved here 11 years ago, and they were helping me with a college and kind of young 20s network. And then eventually they started to have kids. They moved out to Round Rock, and they've just, whatever they're doing in life, that's where they're going to serve. Now they're helping plant Gateway Pflugerville and connect with their neighbors in that way. Which leads to another thing that we might consider. I don't have time to serve. You know, we live in a busy city where there's always things to do. And if you have kids, you can find yourself just overwhelmed. I remember when the kids were little and you want them to, find what they're great at. Maybe they could grow up and become a professional athlete, or at least get college paid for, right? And I remember somewhere early on, we began to realize if we allowed ourselves, we would be driving these children all the time, everywhere. And so we began to give them each a season. Caleb got to play sport this season, and Trevi got to be in a play or be part of a dance team in that season. And we would just have a season where one of them could be involved, and then we'd switch out. Because, see, eventually we began to realize our most important desire is that they would actually grow up and have a relationship with God, that they might make it through middle school and high school and avoid some of the temptations that the world would try to suck them into. And so we began making youth group a priority, and camp a priority, and mission trips a priority. Because ultimately, even if they were great at something, even in that context, that's the people that God has put in our life that we could serve while we're serving with them. But I wonder, what is keeping you from serving? When you don't have time to serve, it could be just giving up one night of TV a week to serve your neighbors, giving up that one show, the least of all your favorite shows, just to have community, to be a source of encouragement. Or you might be thinking, it's not about time, I have other priorities. It's interesting because Gateway, we used to be called kind of jokingly Dateway, because so many single people have met here and gotten married, right? And there's no money-back guarantee that if you start serving with us, you will find that special someone, right? For those of you who are single. But I will tell you that there's something really beautiful about serving alongside other people. People who are willing to serve are the kind of people you want to be with, because they're learning how to meet the needs of other people. They're not just going out to have their needs met. If you go to somewhere where everyone is there to find someone to meet their needs, if two of those people get together, it gets really hard. But if you become the type of person that you are trying to meet the needs of others, it's in that context that you might find someone who's also trying to meet the needs of others. And if you try to outserve your spouse, you will find yourself in a wonderful relationship. Because some of you might be thinking, but you don't understand, I need someone to help meet my needs. But if you can move to the place where you have a relationship with God that's so fulfilling, so filled with love and joy that you actually are able to give out of the abundance of that relationship, you know He's meeting all of your ultimate needs. You don't need that person to meet your needs. Anything that comes from a spouse, a family member, a coworker, a friend is bonus. That's what God is calling us into. Jesus continues the story in John 13. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Think about that for a moment. Jesus' invitation to you and me is, do you want to be blessed? Do you want to become great? It's different than what the whole world might tell you. It's to learn to lose your life in serving others. That's how you find life. See, I believe that God wants to do something in you and through you that's greater than you could ever ask or imagine. But it happens in the context of surrender. It happens in the context of a connection with God, the supernatural connection with Him, that through your life, supernatural things happen. See, God wants to do miraculous things in you and through you, but it requires a willingness to follow His path, and His path is not easy, but it's the best path. And so what I want to do right now is I want to invite you to just allow this next song to be a prayer for God to do the miraculous. Maybe there are people in your life you've given up on, that maybe He puts a burden in your heart that you might serve them. Maybe there's something he's calling you to that you've known he's wanting you to do. You've lacked the courage, but now in this new season is your chance to step out in faith. Maybe there's the lower part of that door. There's an opportunity that just seems beneath you. Maybe it's on the other side of you saying yes, that you will see the miraculous. So I want to invite you to stand with us. And as we sing this song, sing it as a declaration of what you want to see God do in and through you.